Welcome to Bloomberg Law. I'm Pacchia. On Friday, June 24th, the New York State Legislature voted to legalize same-sex marriage. Announcing the passage of the Marriage Equality Act, Governor Cuomo commended the bill's sponsor, State Senator Duane, for his lifetime commitment to fighting for equality. Joining us now is Senator Duane. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for coming in. What does the Marriage Equality Act do? What effectively is in the bill, other than allowing people the right to get married?
It really just makes the domestic relations law gender neutral. So now it's not husband and wife, man and woman, it's spouse and spouse. And that really is the only difference. That will appear on marriage licenses, which people can apply for now. Marriage will start taking place in New York July 24th, but people can already start applying online. They can get their license application, and it'll just say spouse and spouse.
Right. We're going to talk about what's going to happen on the 24th in a moment, but first I'd love to get the background on how this law came to be. What happened?
Well, we had tremendous leadership from Governor Cuomo. He made sure that all of the stakeholders were at the table together. The national gay rights groups, Human Rights Campaign, Marriage Equality New York, which is a local one, Empire State Pride Agenda, Freedom to Marry, which is a national group, the Gill Foundation people, myself, the people in the Assembly who were involved with it, and legal experts. And we sat at the table and we worked through a strategy. Also, Christine Quinn, the Speaker of the New York City Council, was involved, and we just stayed on message to the best of our ability, and the governor provided great leadership.
At what point did you get the feeling that this would be different from 2009, the last time a bill like this was attempted?
Well, there was one senator, Jim Alisi from Rochester, who had been widely expected and who, in fact, had wanted to vote for the bill 2 years earlier. He announced publicly that he was supporting the bill, so that he was the first Republican to support it. So at that point, we had 29 out of 30 Democrats, and now we had one Republican, and we needed 33 votes. Shortly thereafter, Senator Roy McDonald, who represents the Saratoga area, announced that he was going to vote for it too, so now we had two Republicans. And we just needed a couple more Republicans to put us over the top. And I thought that we had an excellent chance with one named Steve Saland. I wasn't absolutely sure, but I was pretty sure. And this is also all based on prior knowledge and prior history and what had happened 2 years before. And a new Republican senator, Senator Grisanti from Buffalo, he was the final vote. But Senator Grisanti was one of, I would say, a handful of senators who I believed one of them would be the one who would vote yes. Going into the vote, I knew the votes we had because they were publicly announced, but it still wasn't enough. But I was hopeful that because the Republicans who are in the majority by a vote are in charge of bringing bills to the floor, I was hopeful that the reason they brought it to the floor was because there were going to be enough votes for it to pass.
One of the things that jumps out at me in looking at this situation is Governor Cuomo's role. Suddenly he's being talked about potentially a contender for the presidential nomination for the Democrats in 2016. Other than signing the bill, what did his role look like? How involved was he?
He was extremely involved from beginning to end, and he was also, I would say, the chief negotiator with the Republican conference and the Republican senators. And though we all had relationships, and of course I'm fortunate to be in the Senate, so I have a personal relationship with all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I do think that his persuasiveness and his razor-sharp focus on the issue was incredibly helpful in putting it over the top, and so that made an enormous difference. You know, the former Governor Patterson had been supportive of marriage, and even Eliot Spitzer had been supportive of marriage, and but Governor Cuomo brought it over the finish line, and that's amazing and incredible. And I hope it does raise his national profile. I believe he has more work to do in New York State because he's been doing an excellent job in New York State. But
Do you
what
think he has
wants to
national aspirations?
what he wants to do in the future is up to him. I would say I hope so, but I want to keep him in New York for a while because I think we need him in New York for a while yet. And then at some point, if he wants to be set free, I'd be willing to set him free.
There is some language in the bill about religious institution exemption.
Yes.
Legally speaking, how relevant are they?
Well, the religious exemptions already exist in New York state law. What happened is that they are just repeated in this legislation. And already, for instance, if a rabbi didn't want to marry a heterosexual couple, a rabbi didn't have to marry that heterosexual couple. So any church officiate already had the right to say yes or no. That remains the same. Equally, they have the right to say yes or no in using their facilities, which they actually already had. If they wanted to say, no, you can't have your reception in our church basement, that is their right to say that. So that remains. However, a gay or lesbian or a bisexual or transgender officiate, religious person, cannot refuse to marry a heterosexual couple either. So the law goes both ways. No one in government, no one who works for the public can say no to anyone, but anyone, gay or straight, in the religion can say no whenever they want to. So the only difference is really that now gay people will not be allowed to say, I won't marry a heterosexual couple.
Do you expect any legal challenges looking down the pike to this law?
I don't. And I also worked very hard on passing hate crimes legislation back in 2000, and we passed a Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act a couple years later. Last year we passed a Dignity for All Students Act, which was also LGBT inclusive. In fact, the first time it even included protections for people based on gender identity expression. That passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support. So all of these bills passed with bipartisan support, including marriage. And the state's highest court, when they ruled against marriage, said, we're ruling against marriage because the legislature has to make this decision. So now that the legislature has made the decision, the courts will say, the legislature said, so that's the way it is. And even if someone does try to appeal it, which is sort of the final part of the bill, while it's going through the courts, the marriage equality will remain in effect. And as I say, the highest court will rule that we said the legislature should do this, and the legislature did it. So that's the law in New York State.
Let's talk about July 24th. That is going to be an interesting day for sure.
Yes.
Officials are readying for thousands of people coming into offices to get married. How is this going to play out practically?
Well, I want to say a couple of things. Because Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire had already passed marriage equality, and recently the District of Columbia, California, for a year there was a window where you could get married. Canada, you can get married. There are other countries in Europe where you can get married. All of those marriages are recognized in New York State. So those people who are married in other jurisdictions are married in New York State. Now, if they didn't get, a gravy ladle, or they need to top off some serving dishes, I guess they could get married again in New York. But they are married. So there is a group that's already married and will get married. But there are a lot of people who have been waiting to be able to get married in New York. And I think the 24th will be a busy day. And, people like to be the first at anything. So I don't know how many people, but I think it's going to be a crowded day at every county clerk's office across the state.
And that said, what do you think about the economic impact of this bill?
Wonderful for New York State, absolutely wonderful. There'll be a large increase, not just in services that go along with weddings, florists and caterers and catering halls and you name it, all of the things that go along with weddings. But I also think people will come to New York now and get married. Any jurisdictions that recognize, in many cities across the nation, recognize, for instance, domestic partnership or civil unions, and they will recognize marriages if they're performed in other places. So I expect a lot of people will come to New York to get married, and I'm a New Yorker, always, forever and ever. I love New York, and tourism is incredibly important. So already I know that the city and state government is saying, come on to New York,
right,
and enjoy our marriage equality. We want you to come here and have a very loving and good time and spend some cash.
Right. So looking at this on the national level, New York now is just the 6th state to legalize same-sex marriage, and it's, I believe, only the 3rd to do so through the legislature. That is to say, it wasn't forced to do so by the courts. Still, it's a huge event.
Huge.
Looking at this issue.
Huge.
How does this change the national picture?
Well, what happens in New York has a major impact on what happens across the nation. People do look to New York for leadership on a whole host of issues, and I just have to quickly put in that Iowa is a state that was done with the courts. I don't want to leave Iowa out because
right,
you can get married in Iowa, so it's not just bi-coastal, it's in the middle of the country as well. However, now I have to come back, ask your question again if you don't mind, because I just lost my train of thought.
The national picture for same-sex marriage, how has it changed now that New York has...
I think it's huge. New York is... many states look to New York, and I know that because of other legislation passed. And in fact, last year, on another issue, I was instrumental in modernizing our HIV testing law, and states across the nation reach out to me and say, could we have a copy of it because we want to copy that in New York. And I know that national and state LGBT groups and civil liberties groups and other civil rights groups are looking at our law to see if that law would be one that they could get passed in their state. I think it's going to have an immediate impact, or I'm hoping it will. In, for instance, Maryland, there's a movement in New Jersey, and even though the governor there doesn't support it, I think the people of New Jersey support it. So I do think this is going to have a domino effect. I think Maine, though they passed marriage and then it was defeated in a referendum, I believe that the next time it will win in Maine. I believe it'll win the next time in California. And I think that Illinois just passed a very, very strong partnership law. I think Illinois now has a good reason to pass a marriage law. I think it will become the law of the land very soon. And as soon as there's just a slightly larger nucleus of states that have this, I do think then on a federal level, whether it's through the courts or in Congress, that marriage...
That's where I was going next. Once we get to a majority or something close to a majority of states allowing same-sex marriage, do you expect a large federal lawsuit to come online to force other states, compel them to pass same-sex marriage laws?
Yes, because I believe there is a law that was passed, unfortunately, DOME in the Defense of Marriage Act, which said states did not have to recognize marriages from other states, same-sex marriages from other states. The federal government didn't have to recognize them. I believe, many people believe it is unconstitutional, similar to what happened with interracial marriages.
Do you expect that to go all the way up to the Supreme Court?
I do, unless DOMA is rescinded and then state by state it'll just become a reality, because it will mean that even if a state doesn't have same-sex civil marriage, they will have to recognize that marriage in their own state. So, two ways: get rid of DOMA, and if it goes to the Supreme Court, I believe that it'll be a winner. But you never really know. It's been a divided court, but since you're asking me right now and this week, and I'm feeling optimistic and good, I'll say absolutely we're going to win there. Right. So it's going to be the law of the land very, very soon.
Right. And finally, on a personal note, have you and your partner decided to get married under this new law?
Well, what happened was when Massachusetts first passed marriage, we started to talk about it, and then we said, no, we're going to wait for New York. So it just happened, and so now the discussion started again, and I don't know. I can't predict the date, and I also want to say it's important. We were asking for not that everybody had to get married. We just wanted the right to get
Right.
married.
Well, let me congratulate
you
you
no.
on the right to get married if you so choose to.
And it's complicated for a politician. It
Right.
either has to be very big or very small. So
Right.
there's a lot of we have a lot of discussion to have.
New York State Senator Tom Duane, I want to thank you very much for coming in today. This was a pleasure.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
If you'd like to learn more about the issues we just discussed, go check out our offerings on BloombergLaw.com and also on the Bloomberg Terminal. I'm Pacchia. Thanks for watching.